Either way, we're going to jump in and talk today a little bit about the Word of God. We've been studying the Gospel of Luke, and what I want to talk to us about today essentially is how wise is it to distrust? And then how wise is it to trust? And where do we place our faith? Because if you think about what is trust, it's actually very, very close to faith. In fact, some scholars have pointed out the biblical word for faith is pisteo, but the biblical word for trust is pitheo. And if you go back far enough, they may have actually been the same word at some point. What is the object of our faith? What is the object of our trust? And we're going to look at a couple things today, probably 2 or 3 of the most influential things in our life. And can we trust those? We're actually looking at the absolute religious and politically driven murder of Jesus Christ today at the hands of the most religious, revered, respected religious men in the land of Israel. That's what we're talking about. We had left off looking at Jesus praying over this cup. The cup was not the beating. The cup was the wrath of God that had been stored up for the nations. He finished the cup, he went back, and immediately Judas shows up with the Roman cohort, a delegation basically to arrest him. At this point, everyone flees. Peter follows at a distance, but every time he's questioned, he loses it, he breaks down. Jesus is actually arrested and taken to the home of the high priest. And so really our goal today is quite simple. We want to come to terms with corrupt religion. You know, the Pharisees actually had an honorable start. I mean, Israel had been so disobedient to this covenant. They had been kicked out of their land. Other people were imported 70 years under Nebuchadnezzar. Like, somebody has to put a stop to this. And so these men rose up and they said, you know, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. We're going to have obedience to the law. In fact, we're going to create rules to make sure you don't violate the rules and get even close to breaking the law. We don't want this trouble again. That's how the Pharisees started. And as we'll look at today, by the time their show is over, they had incited the crowds to scream, "Crucify him! Crucify him." Do we just blindly trust religious figures today? I hope not. And when they couldn't accomplish their will in and of themselves, they needed a corrupt politician. Do we as Christians really want to put our faith, our trust, our confidence in a government? I don't care which side of the flag or the aisle you stand on. When you have an institution that comes to be formed like that, there's a temptation to make them the central figure in your life, like this kind of security net we're always talking about or whatever. Is that, as Christians, what we want to do? Is put our trust, our confidence in a politician or in a political system? Just in case you fall asleep, I'll answer the question now. No. No, we don't. Where does our trust lie? Embedded in this sham, murder we're about to look at is a truth so powerful, it becomes the central hub out of which everything else that you focus on falls into place. And so we'll look at that. And when the government and the religion, and we are heading towards a one world religious system where these two will merge. And when they put the screws to us, and it is coming, how do we respond? We'll look briefly at that. Our text today, Luke chapter 22. Jesus had been arrested and taken to the home of this high priest. It says, now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him and beating him. And they blindfolded him and were asking him, saying, prophesy, who is the one who hit you? And they were saying many other things against him, blaspheming. I want you to understand, these aren't a bunch of Roman soldiers. These aren't a bunch of atheists. This is at the home of one of the most devout religious men in the land. And this is what they've done. They mocked him. They beat him up. They actually arrested him at night, which was a complete violation. Everything they did not only violated the Old Testament scriptures, but also the components, in other words, their version of the Constitution. Sanhedrin is a governing council. That's what these men who are going to hear this case were. They violated all of their own rules as well. Completely illegal. There were to be no proceedings at night. Nothing. The next morning, when it was day, the council of elders of the people assembled both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chamber, saying, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you a question, you will not answer," because he stumped them at every turn. They had no explanation for his knowledge or his miracles or what he was. And essentially what he's saying is, I'm done playing your games. I'm done playing your games. But verse 69, "But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." I'm not playing games with you anymore. I'm not doing miracles. I'm not trying to impress you. I've done all that. I fulfilled everything that your scriptures said I was gonna. So I'm not doing this whole "are you the Messiah" thing. I've made it crystal clear. My actions align with the Old Testament, and you've made your decision. So don't go there with me. But know this, men. The day is coming when you will see the Son of Man, which means human. You'll see this human being, right here, me, seated at the right hand of the power of God. And they all said, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he said to them, "Yes, I am. Yes, I am." Then they said, What further need do we have of testimony? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. Forget the fact that their constitution, their legal Bill of Rights, doesn't allow him to testify against himself. Not like ours does. It's even more conservative. You cannot testify against yourself. There had to be 2 or 3 witnesses with the same story in order for this to be a legal trial. Furthermore, the trial was to be public out in the temple courts after the morning sacrifice where everybody could watch. This is an early morning charade, a mockery. And they proceeded with it. That's it. We've made our decision. What more? We've heard it from his own mouth. This is the Sanhedrin. But see, the problem they have is under the Roman occupation, they are no longer able to carry out a death sentence. They need a politician to do that. They need Rome to do that. So undoubtedly, somebody had went ahead and told Pilate, "We're coming, we have a case for you to hear." And the whole body of them got up and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ." And remember, that's not his last name. That's a title that goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. Meshiach is how they would see it in Hebrew. It's not a last name, it's a title. Forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar. Anybody remember what Jesus said? I mean, here's one we kind of wish was true. Complete lie. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. The most religious men in the land went to a politician and lied right through their teeth. Pilate asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him and said, It is as you say." Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I don't find any guilt in this man." And you have to think for a perspective. Pilate is not Jewish. He absolutely could not care less about the concept of a Messiah. He has one job and one job only, and that is to protect Caesar. His only concern was this claim to kingship. So here he sits standing above, looking at essentially what we would probably conclude would be a homeless peasant. At this point, he has been beaten up, rocked, bloody mess. And so Pilate's going, yeah, you know what? I got to have the bosses back in Rome. You guys got nothing on him. You got no witnesses. This is ridiculous. This man is no threat. I see nothing here. No guilt in this man. Now, I didn't include all of it for the sake of time, but there's another narrative. See, if you remember when Jesus was a baby, it was Herod who was really threatened by the idea of a coming king. So he set out to kill all the babies. And Jesus departed. His parents took him to Egypt and they hid out. Herod's dead. He comes back. This whole Herod thing, he's not even Jewish. It's a complete mockery of the eternal kingship that Israel had under a theocracy. This guy is not even a Jew, bribes his way into, and then his kids also bribe their way. And one of them, another Herod, is king over the area of Galilee. So Pilate is a politician. He's under pressure now because not only does he have to keep Caesar's back covered about this idea that somebody would overthrow him, but the last thing in the world he wants is any kind of uprising. I mean, every politician wants to keep his people in check, keep the money coming, off to Rome it goes, keep peace, and Rome would use whatever measure possible to make sure they did that. But this coward catches wind that he's a Galilean. Wait a minute, I'm going to get out of this. I don't want to deal with this. Let's let Herod deal with it. Herod's basically, kind of church history tells us, he's just a complete buffoon knucklehead. He's up in Galilee, has no real authority, and won't follow at all. But he goes up there, and Herod's like, hey, can you pull off one of those zinger tricks? Like, I just want to see a miracle. I've been hearing forever. This is the guy, by the way, who had John the Baptist's head cut off. So this is not a nice man. He doesn't care. But can you do one of those cool things? Like, here's a thing of water. Come on, I want to drink. Just that kind of nonsense. But in the end, he's like, this isn't worth my time either. Sends him back. So we go back to Luke chapter 23. Sends him back to Pilate, essentially. And Pilate says this, you brought this man to me as one who incites the people to rebellion. And behold, having examined him before you, I have found no guilt in this man regarding the charges which you make against him. In fact, nor has Herod. Nor has Herod. For he sent him back to us, and it's like nothing deserving death has been done by him. There's nothing there. Were they that disorganized and unprepared? Remember, they began to plot this murder the moment he called the name of Lazarus to come out of the grave. They watched him raise the dead, and they decided right then and there, he's going to die. He's going to die. They've long since made up their decision. They had a better plot than this. They needed those witnesses. And every time a witness would come, and we could look at Matthew and Mark and John, I don't want to take the time because our approach to this morning may be going to be just a little bit different. But the reality is the number one witness went and hung himself, Judas. The witnesses all crumbled, and not even these corrupt politicians. They're looking at this and going, this is a sham. This is a complete and total joke. So then he continues on and he says, therefore I will punish him and release him. See, he's obligated to release to them at the feast one prisoner. This is where we're introduced to an interesting character by the name of Barabbas. One of the most amazing things about Barabbas, you may be familiar with the term Barabbas and not even realize that you are. You might have heard of Simon Bar Jonah. Bar means son of. Maybe you've had a friend that's had a bar mitzvah. He's now a son of the law, accountable to the law. You may also, in a different context, be familiar with the term Abba. It's an Aramaic term, meaning father. Abba, father. Barabbas' name then is son of the father. That's what it means. It's kind of powerful. They're screaming for the wrong guy. But see, there was this tradition at Passover, and that's what they're celebrating. Where the tradition came from, the text really doesn't say. But it's Rome's way of perhaps easing the pain of the Israelites as they milked them for all their taxes. So every year we're going to release someone at the Passover. So Pilate's now trying to use this. Here's my out. Here's my out. I got a lot of pressure, but they know as well as I do someone's going to go free, so let's do that. See if that works. But they cried out all together, saying, away with this man. Release for us Barabbas, the son of the Father. The irony. How much truth do they have to stare at? My goodness. So blinded by pride, so blinded by their own religious accolades. They climb that ladder, and there's no Jewish peasant carpenter going to tell them they had to be born again. There's no Jewish carpenter whose mom's a floozy from Nazareth going to tell them that all of our garb and our robes and everything precious to us was no good. We're not going to tolerate that. We're not going to repent. We're not going to change our mind and go, oh my goodness, we are dead wrong on this. Barabbas. We want Barabbas. They kept on calling out, saying, crucify him. Crucify him. And the they there is the word laos. We get it. Laity. This is no longer just leadership. Leadership, religious leadership, mixed with political nonsense, had beat this drum so long and so hard, and the people were so blinded by blindly following leadership that honestly, I believe this is probably one of, if not the lowest point in Israel's history. And we're going to look at the truth that's embedded in this whole thing in just a minute. But what a disaster. Pilate's response. He said to them a third time, why? Why do you insist on killing this guy? What evil has this man done? I found no guilt in him demanding death. None. Therefore, I'm going to punish him and I'm going to release him. That's 4 times. Verse 4, not guilty. Verse 14, not guilty. Verse 15, Herod, not guilty. Here it is again, verse 22, not guilty. This is the verdict. He didn't do anything. He is not guilty. But see, Herod's a politician. We got to please the people. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to punish him. So we ordered that Jesus be taken out and flogged. Apostle Paul was flogged 4 times. What's the big deal? Paul was flogged with a Jewish flogging, which is a rod to the back. At one time, Paul was rendered unconscious through the beating, so I don't mean to minimalize it, but when it comes to comparison to a Roman flogging was a whip with these leather cords that came off it. Some had bones, some had sharp metal, all sorts of things. You've seen the Passion of the Christ. Most scholars think that they came up a little short because his face was too recognizable. But other than that, tie him up, stand back, and give him a whipping that would rip chunks of flesh off the size of chicken nuggets. And as I mentioned last week, and we'll look at it again, Jesus speaks to us so much through the Psalms. It's one of the most powerful things. In fact, we're going to do a mini-series on it here as we wrap up Luke, but Messiah, Jesus Christ, speaking to us hundreds of years before crucifixion was ever put into place, speaking to us from the cross, saying, I could see my bones. My joints are out of place as I struggle for air. The Roman flogging was nothing little. Most scholars think, and you got to bring in Matthew and Mark, which I really don't want to do this time around. Suspect Pilate probably nudged the guards. Give him a good one. We need to keep this crowd happy. If we beat him and flog him where he's dang near dead, maybe that will satisfy the crowds. Do you think maybe it did? Bring him back in. They were insistent with loud voices asking that he be crucified. Crucify him. There's a tendency to go, this doesn't make sense. These are religious people. These are the people who saw Lazarus walk out of the grave. These are the people who probably lined up and watched him take a couple fish and some bread. And all of a sudden, these baskets just begin to produce food. And he healed the lame. He walked up to the pool of Siloam and saw this guy who was crippled and just healed him. John chapter 9, the guy born blind, not anymore. How do you go from watching such amazing acts of mercy and grace to stand back and watch the object of that mercy, grace, and love, this expression, even this devout atheist today have no choice but to look at the teachings of Jesus Christ and go, and yet this religious crowd is screaming relentlessly, crucify him, crucify them. And their voices began to prevail, and so Pilate pronounced the sentence and demanded their demand be granted. And they crucified him. And we're going to come back to that and go through the cross step by step. But for today, I want to push back for a minute and again think about, in any context in our lives, do we let this kind of religious figures overly influence us? Or how about politics? Do we get so wrapped up in political positions that we would actually lose all compassion and grace? But first, as I said, very unwise to trust in a religious organization or system today. Very unwise to trust in a politician or the system in which he must subscribe to. Because I don't talk politics in church. We're talking King Jesus. That's politics. That is politics. Because you let the people do what they want to do. At the end of the day, I want to show you the truth that you have to take to the bank, right? And it's all embedded in this thing. In other words, Jesus said, I'm not playing the am I the Messiah thing anymore, but know this. Let's go back to verse 69. From now on, you will see me, Son of Man, that's human being. Look at what he says, and I promise you they knew exactly what he was talking about from the book of Daniel. This is what Daniel says. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like Son of Man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. The Ancient of the Days in this context is the Father. And you have this Son of Man, this human being, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. Wait a minute. A human being comes up to the Ancient of Days and somehow is given glory, a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away. His kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. The left will be destroyed. The right will be destroyed. Let them be destroyed. Who is the one politician, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who literally is the Son of Man, comes to the Father and is given all of this? And they knew exactly what he was referring to. Exactly. Because in their theology, if you were to go back into first century Jewish thought, and they wrote prolifically, they knew that the Godhead was dual in nature. We go one step further. He's triune in nature, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. In their writings, they knew entirely possible from texts like this that when Messiah came, he may in fact be a man. Other writings said he may in fact be an angel, and other writings said he may in fact be like an invisible spirit. In fact, it was this crowd, it was this Sanhedrin when John the Baptist showed up. And he's like a revival, man. He's got everyone's attention. He's out at the river and people are coming in droves. And these very men went and stood and watched. Why? What were they looking for? The Messiah. They knew. They knew. And that's what prompted their next question. The moment he says that, they asked with another question. Are you the Son of God then? Is that what you're saying? They didn't really want to know. They wanted the charge. But what did he say? Yes, I am. Son of man means human. Son of God, to a Jewish mindset, means God. If I was to say to you that my golden retriever had puppies, would you ask if they were dogs? It would be a silly question because dogs give birth to dogs. But somehow in our mind, we didn't quite catch the Jewish concept. In the Jewish concept, if God had a child, the child would be God. They knew exactly what he was talking about, and they made these connections from the knowledge of the Old Testament. But there was no way that this version is going to satisfy our need. This peasant, this poor little guy who doesn't fit the bill. He doesn't fit the bill. Oh, but they knew all right. They had better know. Is the Messiah in the Scriptures ever said to be the Son? You bet he is. Look at Psalm chapter 2. In verse 7, I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord Yahweh. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. And the begotten refers to the new kind of order of the resurrection. But it's crystal clear in the Scriptures, this promised one, promised in Genesis chapter 3, re-engaged in Israel to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, and David all the way down the line, would be the Son of God. That question came very natural for them. So as we stand back and we kind of go, you know what? Religious organizations get a little nutso. I don't know that I want to trust them. And politicians, even the ones you like, are part of a structure that you really would be very unwise to place all of your faith or all of your trust or all of your confidence in them. And I'm dead serious. This is not a knock on one side or the other, but this is the lesson we have to learn. And the two will merge again. They will merge again. And I think personally, we would be very, very unwise to trust either of these systems. We're unwise to trust religion. I want to just see if I can illustrate this for a second. On a kid's bike, I had to take it apart. But you know, in the middle of this is a hub. A hub. And from that hub, you have extensions that help your world go round. What's at your hub? What's at your hub? Is it a religious structure, a religious man, or a system? And I'm not over-indicting anybody. Probably, I will tell you flat out, I personally, my family has been deeply wounded at the hands of religious men. Deeply wounded. And the only thing that hurt me more than that was when someone else told me, you're now the religious person that's hurt me. What you've said and what you've done, and I'm just like, my gosh. I'm not your hub, am I right? Like, who's your hub? It can't be me. It can't be a religious figure. You can't trust that. I will always let you down. How about the government? Is the government the hub? Are they your source of security? And from that security flow all of your relationships that make your world go round. And I get it. There is a source of security in a government this massive that will just, they can't be our hub. They just count, and I'm going to walk onto thin ice and right back off again. Right now, there's a lot of people upset about who's their hub. Nobody, but our triune God and his word is your hub. And if he's that hub and I fail you, so you get a little bit of kink in one of your spokes. If your boss fails you, maybe your spoke gets kinked, but your wheel keeps going because you've got a rock solid hub. Who's your hub? What have you placed your faith or confidence in? Because from that hub is an extension. You might even say a hub is a biblical worldview. Do you view the world through a lens that God is your hub? And from that flows all of your other relationships. And if God is your hub, when things get worse, when the screws begin to tighten on us, we have a point of reference, but we're still on solid ground. I want to show you guys something today. I'm sure many of you saw this week. This is not a third world country, which you're about to watch. Well, if we're not, excuse me. Help me out, Joe.
Place your hands behind your back, away from your back. No, behind your back, away. No, stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Sure. Stand up. All right. Hands behind your back. All happy?
That was a pastor in Canada. His hub is God. Now, he made a decision to open his church when the government said no. I'm not going to get into that whole thing right now. We as a church never had to face that because we were guests at the Boys and Girls Club. But this man stood on solid ground. He's turned himself in to serve a 6-year prison sentence in Canada. This didn't happen in China, North Korea, or Cambodia. Oh, Mike, you're getting political. No, I'm not. I'm preparing the congregation for the reality is one difference between the border and South, and that is the Constitution of the United States, which will fall, and that it better not be your hub either. He didn't have to go back. He went back, submitted to a government that is going to lock him up for 6 years. He modeled Christ. He answered poignant questions about his identity and submitted to the will of God. What do you think that pastor's hub is? I firmly believe it's coming to America as well. I really do. And that's not a political statement in the sense of, why, Pastor, are you talking politics? I'm talking reality. How are we going to respond? There's a couple responses because we hold our worldview in our country in such high regard. It is the hub. And we will fight for that hub no matter what. If Christ is the hub, maybe our focus is on making sure the world understands Barabbas went free. I mean, think about it. He was guilty of everything they accused Jesus of. He was actually a zealot. He was a political operative who wanted the nation to rebel. He's actually what they wanted in a Messiah. He was a murderer. Put a knife in somebody in all likelihood. He's guilty, and he walks away. For all I know, that man's been in hell for 2,000 plus years. Don't misunderstand me. But you can't miss the narrative. And every one of us has to look and go, I think there's a bit of Barabbas in me, huh? I go free. He goes to the cross. Do we want to fix the hub or preach the message that the guilty can go absolutely free? And I mentioned Psalm 2. Oh, it's already up there. This is what God says, do homage to the Son. He's talking about his Messiah. That he not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him. Do you take refuge in a religious system, or heaven forbid, me? You've misunderstood what a pastor is. Have we paid so much homage to what we think is the ideal America that we miss the gospel? Are we putting all of our effort into the ideal America? The man wearing the flag you want to hold up will come for you someday. What if we put all of our effort into making sure that people understand, just like Barabbas, you could go free? It's the gospel. And it's only the gospel that will allow us to not worry about what the government does, what powerful religion does. And for some of us, it's time we pay homage to the Son. And that might look different for all of us. Maybe some are visiting here today and I'm like, yeah, the Jesus thing, I don't really know. I mean, it's kind of cool. I like the church of it all, but have you ever said yes to his offer of eternal life? Have you ever processed the words on that cross? It is finished, and it's applicable to you. And it is literally a free gift. He just wants to give you the gift of eternal life so you can live in paradise with him forever. There comes a point where you look at the cross, you look at Christ, and you go, you know what? I'm like way overdue to finally say, I just believe this now. Or maybe for some of us, you do believe this. But it's kind of a spoke and not a hub. It's kind of neat is we have 3 or 4 people in our church that want to get baptized. And we're working on the budget constraints and just we're going to get this really, don't you think that corner would be perfect right there? And someone said, how much is the tank? I'll bring you a check next week. Love that. Thank you. Maybe you've never been baptized. Maybe you've never stood up and said, I believe in Jesus Christ and I want to show the world. I want to identify with him. We'd love you to add that list of people wanting to profess their faith and get baptized. And that means you're taking a little more serious look at your faith. You're saying, I want God to be the central hub in my life. And from that relationship with him will flow proper relationship to the government, proper relationship to my employer, proper relationship to my kids, proper relationship to my spouse, proper relationship to my neighbors, and any one of those spokes gets whacked, the hub is strong enough to hold you in place. Religion will do what it wants, government will do what it wants. You will stand on the solid rock of Jesus Christ. And that's what we trust and what we believe in.